Reddit Ask Me Anything. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 30 years. Ask me anything. First off, kudos to you for doing your service and helping people daily. Thank you. Now to the questions. What is the most disrespect you've been shown, either in public or in a call? Has someone ever tried to charge you with a crime due to their own error? Have you ever had a call so bad that you wanted to jump out of the chair and drive over to the location to help? 1. Surprisingly, it is usually from officer/EMS firefighters. They truly have no clue how much we do, and don't understand why they aren't our first and only priority. But the most disrespected I've ever felt was from another dispatcher. I was working a shift on the ambulance and another unit was having trouble locating a street because the caller wasn't using the new street name from the 911 addresses, but the name that old timers have used for years. So I got on the radio and told the unit where to find the road. So the dispatcher on duty called me and told me to stick with trying my ambulance. He would take care of the directions for the other units. That he damn sure didn't need my help. He did finally apologize days later when he realized that no one else on duty that day knew what road it was, and the man's condition was serious enough he could have died if he had not gotten care in time. But that one cut to the quick. 2. A crime number. But I've had many officers try to blame me when they didn't take a call or didn't want to take a call, or try to write me up because I wouldn't do a call back on a hold up alarm or a panic alarm, or because I refused to do a death notification over the phone. Each time, they were the one who ended up in trouble. 3. I've had many, but the one that instantly comes to mind is when I had a call from a 6-year-old girl who said daddy was hitting mommy, and you could actually hear the slaps and punches. She was so scared and crying. The house was on the county line, and she just knew she was the third house past the post office. Our sheriff's office tried to pawn it off on the other county, and they kept saying it was ours. Finally I cussed both deputies and told them to get down there and figure out jurisdiction later. I was so mad. Have you ever cried on a call? Have you ever gotten a call from someone you knew? Do you see a therapist or do you just deal with the stress of the job on your own? Okay. 1. I haven't cried on a call that I can remember. I have shed a few tears after a couple. 2. Yes. Took many calls for family and friends. Worked 15 years in the county I grew up in. As dispatch and EMS. 3. I've never seen a therapist. I deal with it on my own. They offered it to us after the Oklahoma City bombing, and after the 3rd of May, 1999 tornadoes in Oklahoma City, but I've never felt like I needed it, and I do not take any kind of anxiety meds. Have you had any experiences that were more on the spooky eerie side? If so, give me the spookiest, if you would. Over the years, I've had several where I would get a first party call saying they didn't feel well and asked for an ambulance. When EMS would get there, the patient would be deceased, and paramedics would swear they have been dead for hours and there is no way could have called. No one else would be in the residence and nothing would appear to have been disturbed, so either a ghost called me or someone else was in the house pretending to be the patient. The most recent of these was less than a month ago. These always make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What can we do to make your job easier? Know your location. Be aware of your surrounds. Please stop putting yourselves in a position to be a victim. Answer the questions we ask. We ask them for a reason. Thank you for asking this. Do you ever get to hear resolution to the calls you take? Or do you kind of just get left on the cliffhangers? Luckily I've always worked for agencies where I can find out the end result. Sometimes it's great. Other times it's heartbreaking. Has anyone ever called because they shoved something up their ass and couldn't get it out? Unfortunately yes. Of course their story is always they fell on it. Had a full-size shampoo bottle, bottles, sex toys, food. It's just weird sometimes and takes everything you have not to laugh. 911, what's your emergency? I shoved a whole bag of jelly beans up my ass. What a waste of jelly beans. If they are still in the bag they are generally fine in my experience. How did you end up being a 911 dispatcher? Do you wish you chose another profession or do you enjoy it? I actually applied to the hospital business office for clerical work when I was 19. Ended up working in the running a 10-line switchboard and dispatching ambulances. I love my job. I can't imagine doing anything else. I've been a reserve police officer, a volunteer firefighter and EMT over the years, but those were always my second job. Dispatch is where my heart is. I saw a YouTube video of a little girl named Savannah Helmsley, I think. Her dad looked like he was having a heart attack. He started to call 911 but then became too ill to talk, so little 5-year-old Savannah took over with Ask Me Anything's in calm and presence of mind. Do the kids sometimes surprise you? What about the opposite? A kid who is useless. What do you do in that situation? What do you do to calm down a hysterical person? Trust me, kids are the best. Usually cause they have no idea how serious the situation really is. Sometimes you have to get creative when you ask questions. I've had many amazing kids over the years. A 5-year-old called once. His dad was stabbing his mother. He got the phone, hid his little sister and called me. Was so proud of that kid. Firstly, I want to thank and appreciate you for your effort and work and to post the question, as well as reply to other comments. Have there ever been any calls from suicidal victims or people who call about someone else trying to suicide? And has anyone pranked you before? Serious pranks that are well thought out, clearly planned to deceive, not those that order burgers etc. Thank you for your thanks. And yes, I've spent many hours on phone talking with suicidal callers, trying to learn anything that can help us locate them. This was before we were given a map or cell phone caller themselves. We just got the nearest tower location. Other times someone has locked themselves in a room or a bathroom with a knife or a gun. And sometimes when they will just tell you they are going to kill themselves. Tell you what to go to find them. Because they don't want their family to be traumatized by finding them. Sometimes they will hang up the phone. Sometimes you hear the gunshot and the body fall. And the ones I hate the most are the revenge suicides where they set it up so a certain person is the one that finds them and leaves a note saying why it was all their fault. As for the pranks, nothing major like swatting or anything. But we've had people call in a major wreck, or a possibly shooting on the far side of town, knowing that would pull all the resources, and rob a place on the other side of town. We've had numerous bomb threats called into the courthouse simply because someone didn't want to show up to their court date, or they didn't have the money to pay their fines. Never ceases to amaze me what people will do. On the more light-hearted side of things, what's the weirdest, funniest call you've gotten? Had a lady called me and said that she could hear a woman screaming and it sounded muffled. She just knew that someone was being kidnapped. When officers arrived and located the source, it was actually a big Olay bullfrog she was hearing. She lived in the city and had never heard one. Was legit afraid that someone being kidnapped. What was the most disturbing call you have gotten? I was working in the Oklahoma City area during the bombing of the Murrah building in 1995 and the 3rd of May, 1999 tornadoes. But other than those, 1. The 4-year-old who was literally on fire. She survived but it was rough going. She is an amazing adult now. You could hear her screaming in the background. Firemen said her skin was just falling off her body. Our department offered us all counseling because of it. What are some brilliant ways the caller alerted you without people around them? Say captor, getting suspicious. I've had them call and act like they are talking to their mother. Call and lay the phone down, so we can hear what's going. And call the other party by name. Someone we were very familiar with. I hate these calls so much and feel so helpless. Do you have any examples of your 911 dispatcher skills helping you in face-to-face situations, like real-life emergencies? Over time you learn the tones of voices. My kids and ex-husband hate it. I'm like a human lie detector. My officers have learned to trust me when I tell them that even though the caller says things are good, that something isn't right, and they need to check it out. What happens to people that call 911 for stupid reasons? Usually they are told to call the non-emergency line. If they keep calling for stupid reasons, they can get a ticket for misuse of 911. There are some calls that really shouldn't be on 911 but I will let it slide because I can handle it quicker and get them off my line. And for all I know, this may be the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And so for them it is an emergency. No question. Just thank you for what you do. Not everyone could do that job. You are certainly hidden behind the scenes in the world of public service and you deserve all the appreciation I can give. Are there some calls that made an impact in you that you still think about till this day? I have a handful. I was working in the Oklahoma City area during the bombing of the Murrah building in 1995 and the 3rd of May, 1999 tornadoes. But other than those, 1. The 4-year-old who was literally on fire. She survived, but it was rough going. She is an amazing adult now. You could hear her screaming in the background. Fireman said her skin was just falling off her body. Our department offered us all counseling because of it. 2. The autistic 2-year-old who was dipped in hot water by his mother and her boyfriend. 3. The elderly man left almost forgotten in a back bedroom in his own filth, half-starved while the family was literally eating a steak dinner in the kitchen. Parems on scene. They only called us because, and I'm quoting here, if he dies before the 15th they will want his check back. Police were called and charges were filed. He went to the nursing home, received real care and actually lived another couple years. How many phone calls did you get per day? It depends. Some days it feels like the phone never stops ringing. Other days it's so quiet you can just feel that something bad is going to happen and you just wait for it to break loose. Of course, when I worked in the city it was busier than the rural departments. Some days you have people calling 911 for stupid things you shouldn't call the police for anyway, and sure, not 911. Other days, I've ran completely out of ambulances, firemen and police officers and requesting assistance for other agencies. Did you ever get any calls where you just wanted to call them a donghead and stop wasting your time? More than I can count. People will call because their neighbor has a diesel truck or Harley motorcycle and started it up to go to work at 6 AM. Or because there is a man walking down the street, hasn't done anything, hasn't been on anyone's property, just walking. Call from a trucker who hit the construction orange barrels because no one would then merge. Insisted we send someone to hunt down the truck and give them a ticket. Was not happy when I informed him that if we came out he would get the ticket. He had 5 miles that knew he had to merge, and there was no law that said anyone had to let him in. People call 911 to ask what time the fireworks will start, if the schools are open. Did you hear about the dispatcher in Fort Smith, Arkansas, speaking to the woman who had driven into floodwaters and died? The police chief said that she didn't necessarily break any code of conduct. Do you agree with that? Or should this woman be fired? I actually grew up right across the state line from where that happened, and had a friend that used to live in that apartment complex. While technically no, she didn't break any policies or codes of conduct. She did send help, but because the car had been moved by the floodwaters, they had help locating her. Dispatch has no control over how long the officers firemen take to respond. He was rude and hateful. We sometimes have to get stern with callers to get them to listen and follow instructions. But she was above, and would have been reprimanded if I were her supervisor. However, this dispatcher had already put in her 2-week notice, so I just think she didn't want to do the job anymore. Did you ever get a call where you knew you couldn't help them? There have actually been a lot of them where I was sure that there was nothing we could do, but you send everyone out, and hope you are wrong. There are so many times when someone is calling for a relative and over the phone you can hear agonal breathing, aka death rattle. The family will insist that they are breathing, or just snoring. Trying to convince them that we need to get CPR started is hard. The calls where a young mother is calling because she woke up and her baby is dead, SIDS I assume, and you can't calm her down enough to even try CPR. The suicidal callers where they basically tell you that they are gonna do it, and don't want family to find them. Sometimes they do it with you on the phone, sometimes after they hang up. Totally helpless feeling. I've been a firefighter for a few years already, but I've just become a volunteer dispatcher for my fire department, so I can dispatch when I'm not on shift at the station. My FD have 22 stations around the city and we handle around 9,000 fire calls per year. I've noticed that the fact that I'm a firefighter sometimes really helps the firefighters on duty. They recognized my voice and they know I will be giving them information they really need, since I work in the streets with them. But in the dispatcher world, I'm new. Do you have any tips for a new dispatcher? Never ever stop learning. This is an ever evolving job. Take advantage of others' experience. Remember, when things go sideways, tempers will flare. Things will be said. Try not to take it personal. If your department will send you, take any training you can. How much would you say that the calls you receive have changed over 30 years? In what ways have they changed? People used to call 911 for actual emergencies. I would get so many actual emergency calls on my 7-digit number, and all I could figure was it was denial. That no, it's not bad enough to need 911, but lord did they. Nowadays, they call to ask if the school is closed when the fireworks start because the neighbor looked at them. It's just crazy, and they get hateful and offended when you direct them to call the non-emergency line. What do you and your co-workers think of the TV show 911? I hate it, and don't know anyone that does watch it. The dispatcher is a very small part of it. Most of it is about the officers, firemen. Firstly, thank you and all the 911 dispatchers, and many apologies for butt dialing 911 on my cell phones. I'm sure that's probably the most annoying calls you get, when you could be saving people's lives and all you hear is some silence or distance talking. There are few times my mother had to call 911 due to my father's health, and at times, I have tried to call her in California from Texas for help, and constantly I'm told I need to dial local 911 and have it dispatched to California 911. I usually get super frustrated when it tells me I have to call 911 and I explain I'm in Texas and I need the ambulance in California, especially since I'm already panicking and needed ambulance 15 minutes ago. Won't go too much into details, but my mother cannot speak English well. In any case, when you get calls from persons who do not speak English at all, or well enough, how do you deal with it? It's hard, I'm sure, to get the right translator as well. To most, Japanese and Korean may sound the same, or Portuguese and Spanish etc., and without accurate translations, it could be life or death, I'm sure. Again, thank you to all the dispatchers, EMS, and firemen for saving lives in times when we're in panic. I've never worked at any kind of translator service, so I've learned that most people no matter what know their address in English. If I can get that, I can send an officer to find out what I need. If it's a fire, I'm usually going to get calls from more than one person, and one of them should speak English. I will tell you that if you ever need to call for an ambulance in another state, find out their direct line and call them direct and just give them the information they ask for. Then you don't have to worry about being transferred. Will you tell us what it was like to be a dispatcher during the Oklahoma City bombing? Do you ever have someone not want help from you because of your gender? That one has happened to people I know a few times. I have them always want to talk to an officer because they assume I can't help them, but never because I'm female. What was your scariest call? The worst one for me was a domestic violence victim. She had been beat up by her husband and had locked herself in the bathroom. You could hear him beating on the door, calling her names, telling her that this was gonna cost her big time. Why did she make him mad? Why did she make him do this? She said he was going to kill her. She had a cell phone that didn't have service and only called 911. She was never able to tell me where she lived, and the door broke open and the phone went dead. At the time we only got the nearest cell tower. Had officer drive the area with their windows down to listen to see if they could hear any yelling, but we never found her. Don't know if he killed her and hid the body. If he didn't and she's okay, just don't know. Have you ever had a shitty co-worker who you thought might be detrimental to the mission of the emergency services? How does the rest of a 911 phone bank deal with such a person? Unfortunately, I've told more than one person that they should consider a different career choice. Unfortunately, we have to wait till we get the proper documentation on their mistakes to be able to fire them. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking mad lad. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.